You're listening to Blockchain 2025. The future is right now. Every week, we explore implications of the technology underpinning cryptocurrencies, blockchain.
Each episode is a standalone examination of one industry broken into 3 segments: a basic overview, blockchain's disruptive impact, and relevant crypto projects.
Blockchain 2025 is part of the Bitcoin.com podcast network. Learn about Bitcoin, create a wallet, and buy your first Satoshis all at Bitcoin.com.
Today is November 21st. This is your co-host, Matt Aaron.
And this is Blake Moore.
Blake, it's been an exciting week. I mean, the past 7 days, the Bitcoin Cash Hard Fork, man, I've never sent so many messages on Telegram.
There is never a dull moment, right? It's definitely been, I've been glued to my laptop. It's been a week of sitting in front of it most days.
Yeah. And for listeners that are not aware, we're not going to deep dive again into the Bitcoin Cash Hard Fork, but just understand it's one of the pivotal events for all of cryptocurrency. And it was exciting to be part of and learn with the end goal of making this technology better and more useful for the world.
I agree. I think the biggest thing for me was I really started to understand kind of how the mining ecosystem worked and got more of an understanding of how the parts fitted together. Like I felt my understanding of Bitcoin as a whole was good, but this really meant that you had to kind of deep dive to understand the issues that were being talked about.
And there were also a lot of lessons of social psychology, how people react in times of stress. You can be in a group chat with people and things are all good. And then when there's a lot of stress, the way people talk to each other changes. And it's even more impersonal when you're in a Telegram chat and you're just known by a screen name.
Yeah, it kind of showed people under like kind of extreme stress. There was a lot of uncertainty flying around, and I think it was interesting seeing how it's all panning out and how people are handling it.
There was definitely the underlining fear for some people. Hey, this protocol that I care so much about, Bitcoin, is it going to enter like some dark days? And you could feel that fear in your keyboard. But yeah, Blake, today we're going to talk about a much lighter topic that I have to admit, when I took a first glance at, I was like, oh, this doesn't really have much of a use case like most blockchain projects. But then as you examine it, you realize that, hey, there are some compelling points, and it is coworking.
This is definitely one that we both know plenty about, both working remotely. It's something that I have to deal with a lot of the time as well. So it's definitely one that I'm interested to dive into and see how and if blockchain can be valuable to this whole concept.
Right. And to start off, let's say you were able to go in a time machine and travel to 1965,
right,
to the United States, the typical office man that goes in, stays at the same company for 40 years and he works in office. That's what he does. Even working from home didn't exist. How would you explain to him what coworking is?
Yeah, so I tell him that as the kind of working world has evolved and people aren't stuck in their office, which is probably hard to believe for that guy, that people have different requirements. So they might be working from home sometimes and need to go into an office, or they might just need a quiet place to work that's not at home because their company's based 1,000 miles away. You don't know. But what coworking is, it's in a simplified way, it's like rented office space or spaces, not necessarily that remind you of offices, that you can visit either on a kind of pay-as-you-go basis or kind of a membership as well. And you can just drop in and get your work done there.
Yeah, and no surprise, this actually started in Silicon Valley. The concept of a co-working space is only 13 years old. It started in 2005 by Brad Neuberg, who is a great inventor in my book. He started the movement in San Francisco. And Blake, I know you're laughing. Is it like Alexander Graham Bell on the telephone? Maybe not. But hey, it's changed the way humans interact, right? And we spend most of our life at work. So I don't think it's insignificant.
No, it definitely has. I think it kind of sits quite well with startup culture that's emerged out of Silicon Valley and San Francisco. It slots very well into that. So I can see how that was the breeding ground for what is known as coworking today.
Right. And quote from him, the idea to combine the independence of freelancing with the structure and community of an office space. And he reinvented the word coworking. And if you want to be a snob to people, not co-working, it's really co-working without the hyphen.
That was a stroke of genius, I think. He basically laid his claim to fame with that.
Yeah. And today, there are around 19,000 co-working spaces worldwide with an estimated 1.69 million members. And that number is expected to grow to 3.8 million members by 2020.
That's crazy growth. Yeah, when you think about an industry that's going to grow more than 100% over the next kind of year, I guess, or 2 years. I don't know when that first fact's from, but still pretty crazy growth. You can see which way the working world is going.
Yeah. And the trend is going to continue. I mean, people from the US government can now work from home. A friend of mine, his coworker, she lives in Montana and she telecommutes. And I was like, wow, the US government allows people to work remotely. This is all due to the prolific rise of the internet. Everyone works in tech. Everyone uses their internet for their jobs, no matter what they're doing. So the question, why do I have to go into the office?
It's kind of like a network effect as well, because I'm sure as more and more people noticed others that were working that way, is kind of an attractive proposition. Why wouldn't you want to do that too?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, the amount of people that have to spend an hour in the commute, there's more traffic in 2018 because of the increased human population. Being able to save that commute from an employee side, an employer, less rent, smaller offices. It starts to make business sense to work remotely, at least a couple days a week. There's also families that there's the hybrid model where you maybe 1 day a week you can work from home, or 2 days a week you can work from home. You might have a couple who's raising a young child and they each get like 2 days a week to work from home. So they're able to spend more time with their kid and have more one-on-one time with their young child. And so I think it's fair to say that the idea of a co-working office is going to rise because what's happened? So starting in the early 2000s, people were working from home, but I've been working from home off and on since 2007. So I do have a little bit of authority here. And it's really nice working from home. I've run way different businesses, but co-working space in the last couple of years for me, you really have two options if you want to get outside. Because you get cooped up in the house in your pajamas too much, you're not showering,
Wow.
And you get lonely, man. The one thing that I miss about when I had, full-time jobs when I was very young and in college was just the joking around at the water cooler. Getting the Bitcoin.com team together, which is 80% remote. We're not in the Tokyo office. We had such a good time in Barcelona. And that's one thing you miss, opposed to the advantages of working from home are pretty clear, setting your own hours and freedom. But you do miss that office camaraderie.
It makes a big difference. I think the social element of work, there's kind of pros and cons. On the one side, yeah, it's great to be social and have that social interaction that you get from an office or a co-working space. On the flip side as well, it's interesting that I find when I'm working from home, I get a lot more done. So it's like this counterbalance. But when you throw co-working into the mix, where you have the option to drop in and out, it really kind of means that you can be super productive and way, way more productive than you've ever been before.
Yeah, and you get to feel the energy of the people around you. In co-working spaces, they'll usually have phone booths where you can make calls, free beer, sometimes free coffee, almost always, lounge, patio, foosball, video games, events to bring the community together. And another niche, digital nomads, people that are traveling around their country or to other countries. It's a great way to build a community quickly when you get to a new city. A lot of people just join a co-working space.
Yeah, I've experienced that firsthand. So I've been kind of traveling and now I kind of stay in a place for probably 2-3 months at a time. But until maybe the last year, I was kind of moving around every month or so. And I experienced that firsthand. You go to a new city, drop into a co-working space, and straight away you kind of got people you can talk to straight away and build up a network. It's a great tool for that.
Correct. And if you didn't have a very serendipitous encounter with a unique person at a co-working space last year, you would not be doing this podcast here with me today. That's how you learned about Bitcoin.
That is very true. Yeah, I got given my first bit of Bitcoin in a co-working space on the beach in Thailand. So that's a true story, which then led to me getting hired at Bitcoin.com. So yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but co-working spaces have played an instrumental part in my last couple of years.
That's right. And the benefits for users is there, but it's also a great real estate play because you start a co-working space, you rent an office. Some people, they rent a really big office and then they have their office there and then they make a co-working space out of the rest of the space. So they get free rent or even income for whatever business they're running. That was the case for the co-working space in Valencia. There's a company called WeWork. This is a big business. people in commercial real estate have caught on to this. WeWork is worth an estimated $20 billion, the largest co-working space company in the world. And you join them, you can get memberships where you have access in every city you go to a WeWork space.
And they're pretty great as well. Like if anyone has ever worked in a WeWork, it's just kind of everything you'd want from an office. Pretty much all of them have beer on tap, like good coffee, ergonomic chairs. They're super bright. They have great breakout rooms. It's kind of everything you want, but they're really great spaces to work from.
They've been a blessing for the industry, in my opinion, because you have to step up your game. There's a lot of mediocre co-working spaces. You have to think about the feng shui, the design, the benefits. Does internet reach all parts of the office? All customer service. And you have to step up your game if WeWork's in your city, because it's not easy. So, that's the history. Let's move on to part 2. How could blockchain help co-working spaces?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think that we've spoken about this before, Matt, that there's this kind of habit of trying to turn everything into a product that works with the blockchain. It's going to be interesting to understand if co-working does work with that. And I know we both had our reservations, but also there's a few examples that we've come across that might prove it's viable.
Correct. We also note that a lot of blockchain projects try to be so ambitious, like the eye health podcast. They're like, well, 7 billion humans have eyes. Optometrists are going down. That's why we're going to be like $100 billion ecosystem for eye health on the blockchain. So they try to bite off more they can chew. But then you think about it, could an industry benefit at one part of their business? And it seems that there's kind of a tokenization model enabled by blockchain, a utility token for a co-working space that could have some value.
Right. And I think just something to note as well is that, with the recent developments with kind of in the US with ICOs and kind of the SEC coming in and saying that they have to pay back some investors for certain ICOs that haven't come through on their promises. I think now it's more kind of important than ever that these ICOs actually come through and actually have something viable and something to show for what people are putting in. But that's where something like this, where there's a real world example, it might actually make sense.
That's right. And I'm not talking just about, which is interesting, we did in our research find there are some blockchain hubs. So co-working spaces only for blockchain startups, but membership themselves. So let's go into the first project, which is Primalbase. Blake, what is Primalbase?
Yeah, so essentially what they've done is they had an ICO where there were only 1,250 tokens available for sale. And the price is pretty close to 1 BTC. They raised $8 million. And how it works is that you buy, for the token you have, if you hold that token, you have access to any of their spaces for the whole lifetime you hold that token.
That's correct. Although I saw something on their website that wasn't so clear. They talked about not available at the London office. So it's like a lifetime membership to a co-working space. They're in a couple cities, New York soon, but being able to lease your tokens to part-time members, meaning that let's just say you own this token, which is about $4,000 right now. It used to be higher.
Yeah.
It's a real estate play. So you could essentially own hot desk. The concept is you can own a hot desk at a co-working space and lease that out on a market-based pricing and get recurring revenue. So in theory, instead of having to buy real estate and rent it out, you could buy hot desks, hot desks meaning a non-permanent position, meaning just sit anywhere in this room where they have a bunch of tables and desks, allowing someone access to a co-working space and make revenue off that. So I think the concept is interesting. I'm not sure if the business model is ready yet, but that's what they're trying to do. And he's play a clip from a recent interview with the founders of Primalbase.
Before that, I must admit that we went to a coffee shop. Yeah, it's a bad story actually. And I was really feeling bad after that. And it was really hard to talk to people about waves after that. So I wasn't in a coffee shop today, so I'm feeling good.
And yeah, it's funny they mentioned the coffee shop, right? Because there's probably more people remote working from coffee shops than co-working spaces. But after doing this for years, a coffee shop is not that intimate. Sometimes you don't want to leave your stuff when you go to the bathroom. You have to ask someone to watch your computer. Coffee shops themselves may not be making that much money. And so you feel bad. Like I only spent $4 and I've been here all day. You may not want to make calls. So there are some limitations on a coffee shop, especially if you have teams and so forth, because you can rent small offices. You don't have just to be a solo entrepreneur or freelancer. You can rent a space for your team.
I agree. I've worked from coffee shops in the past, and yeah, exactly what you said. There are limitations with that. And it's so true. After a while, you kind of start to feel bad, and you end up spending more money on coffee and food than you would do if you basically just went and paid for a daily pass at a co-working space. And it's usually much quieter, and you kind of have a bit more, I don't know. Yeah, you feel a bit more comfortable sometimes in a co-working space where you can leave your stuff and go for lunch and know it's all going to be okay. But yeah, coffee shops are great, but not sustainable in the long term, I don't think.
Yeah, or at least the variety, just finding that scenic location. I do like going to coffee shops, and especially like a Friday work where I want to do some like planning and writing, obviously not recording a podcast.
Yeah.
Which is a limitation of a lot of co-working spaces. Blake and I are part-time co-working space users because I can't record podcasts at a co-working space. I like working from home sometimes, just being able to wake up and just kind of work at my own schedule. So co-working spaces are pretty neat because they have these part-time memberships for people like Blake and I we're not disciplined enough to go 5 days a week into a co-working space.
Yeah. I just like to chime in. It's not the fact that I have to record a ton of podcasts that I don't go. I just, kind of can't bother to leave the house sometimes. But that's another thing. But I'm exactly like that. I think I sometimes just like to work from home. I find I'm most productive here. And if that sometimes means that, yeah, if I can find a co-working space with a flexible membership where it's maybe like 10, 15 days a month, or it's kind of affordable enough, yeah, I can drop in for 2 or 3 days a week and not feel bad about not going every day, then that's perfect for me. Which is why something like this, where it has a kind of a flexible angle too, that definitely sounds appealing.
Yeah, and let me bring us all together because we've touched a lot of topics in this episode. We talked about the rise of co-working spaces, how it's an interesting real estate play for those running co-working spaces. It's great for building community, and this new generation of freelancers / work from home people need a solution that's not a coffee shop. In addition to the events and other synergies you can find at a co-working space. And we moved into blockchain, and we brought up Primalbase. So let's go back to Primalbase and what they're doing.
It's an interesting one. I think that, like you said earlier, they're at a point where if they grow enough, then the model kind of validates itself. And it seems like a really good investment. But there are obviously a few concerns that come with it.
Can I start with the first one, Blake?
Yeah, please do. Please do.
Well, this is really cool / a concern. On their website right now at Primalbase.com, a hot desk costs 59 cents of a euro, 0.59 euros, and you pay in Ethereum per day. That's incredibly cheap. That's amazing. And so maybe it's not a concern. Maybe that's just really cool. But as a business, is that sustainable? In a place like Amsterdam, a very expensive city, that would be per month cost of $18 for a hot desk. I mean, that seems very, very cheap. In fact, a 4-seat office would be $2 or €2.34, meaning we could get an office for 4 people in Amsterdam for like 65 euros.
That is crazy. Let's get to Amsterdam.
I kind of want to go with you and like 2 other Bitcoin.com employees and rent a private office immediately with Ethereum because that is an incredible deal.
If only they accepted Bitcoin Cash. Maybe we could get the whole team on board. I don't know. Maybe it's a way that they're trying to just attract people to kind of start using it. I agree. I think that's one of my concerns too, is that, okay, if it's that cheap, it just doesn't feel that sustainable. I don't know if you already mentioned this, but I think other revenue streams for them are kind of focusing on events. I don't know. Maybe that's a business in itself. I don't know how that will supplement what they're trying to do from a co-working angle.
Yeah, I mean, they're in Amsterdam, Berlin, where you are right now, and London, and then New York and Singapore coming. They're going to the top cities first. But a risk here, listen, and this is definitely not investment advice. None of our shows are.
Yeah.
But people have these grandiose plans, a lifetime membership to a co-working space. But what if they go out of business 2 years from now? I mean, there's another company that's much more established called Rent24.
Yeah, they're an interesting one because they've kind of approached it from the opposite direction. So rather than the whole business be based around kind of this blockchain-inspired angle, blockchain-driven angle, not inspired. I don't know why it would be inspired. But they've basically built out they've got a very well-established co-working business already with over 20 plus locations. And then they've got Coliving, all sorts of different spaces.
Hold on, Blake, what is Coliving?
Okay, so Coliving, we hadn't actually talked about this already, have we? So Coliving is taking co-working to the next level. Basically, how it works is you book a room in a co-living space, and you basically would go, and it's like they're usually kind of big shared houses, but with dedicated shared workspaces as well. So usually you kind of have, you'd have your private room, usually your ensuite bathroom. They're usually pretty nice. But then downstairs or upstairs, wherever, you'd have a full co-working space. So you technically don't really have to leave. But there's some really cool ones. So there's actually there's a company called Roam that I learned about a couple of years ago. They've got some really cool spaces around the world, in Bali and Miami and London as well. But it's they can get a bit pricey, but definitely an interesting concept. What are your thoughts on it, Matt?
I've met people. I've never done co-living, and just like anything, a co-working space can be good or bad. So for you, or just, right or wrong for you. Same with co-living. I like the idea of being able to, okay, I want to go to X city. I'll pay one fee with one company, and I have a place to live and a place to work. And I think a co-living will almost always have a gym. I actually saw a place in Miami that had that. It was co-working, co-living. They have a restaurant, gym, all in one in Miami. And it's like a nice way a place like Miami, it's not that easy to move there. You have to find a lot of stuff. You can get a 3 or 6 month lease. So I thought it's a really nice way to enter and live in a city without wasting so much time and effort figuring all those details yourself, especially if you're from another country. If we're going to Budapest or a country where we didn't speak the language, it's like, oh, here's a one-stop shop and we can get started immediately.
Right. And I think it kind of serves two people. On one side, it's people who, just kind of don't want to go through the hassle of that. And then other people who just equally just want to just pay and not worry about having to do the research themselves. But they are usually a bit more expensive. So I think that's I think when I was looking at prices, you'd usually save if you ended up just booking your own accommodation and your own co-working space. But for ease of everything, it kind of makes a lot of sense for some people.
That's a good point.
But going back to Rent24 though, they're an interesting one. I think they seem to have quite a big company already, right? I think they've grown quite big. They're pretty global. I hadn't heard of them previously, even though they're in the city I'm in. But they definitely seem to have a lot going on with co-working spaces, co-living spaces, events, all sorts of stuff.
Right. And it's a utility token similar to Binance, the exchange that did that allows you rewards, kind of like a reward token, almost like frequent flyer points that can be used for discounts on other services. It could potentially go up in value if the company grows. So you're getting a potential, gain and return on your tokens, but you're also risking that if this utility token for Rent24, the primary coin, PRY, if they go out of business or the token doesn't take off and is not used that much, prepaying for these tokens a lot in advance, you could also lose quite a bit.
Right. And I think the important thing that I'd say for this token, it's not really clear to me just yet because the ICO is still running. I think it finishes in February next year. But I think where the real value add will be, so that they're talking about the primary token, you can use it for rewards and different services with hotels, restaurants, car sharing, loads of different stuff. But I think where the real value is if it's kind of discounts or there's actually a saving to be made with that. If it's literally, okay, you can have the coin and you make kind of a minimal saving, or it's kind of you save a couple of %. I don't think people are going to use it that much. But if there's a real value add there, which is not super clear to me just yet, it just seems to be oh yeah, we're going to have all these partners. But let's see. If they pull that off, it could be really, really interesting.
For both of these companies, I wish them the best of luck. And whether they have success or fail, failed entrepreneurs are sometimes referred to as heroes because they try really hard, teach other people who see that, oh, let's just tweak one or two things, and then they do it, and then they fail, and eventually someone gets it right. But I do like the idea of tokenizing desks and offices at co-working spaces as a way to grow, to raise capital. It is worth noting that regulation is another risk, the regulation risk of these coins. And that's not even, another risk would be hacking, right? The coins could be physically hacked. But let's just say that's not a problem. The regulation, what if the SEC says, these primary tokens are securities, they're stocks, and no American citizens are allowed to own them. And you've bought 3 years worth, so you can go to New York, Hong Kong, and Singapore and have co-working spaces with these tokens. That's another risk you're facing. And like Blake said, the vagueness of these white papers, we have all these plans. A white paper is just a white paper. It's a 20 to 45 page PDF and nothing more.
Yeah, you've got to kind of really take them all with a pinch of salt, right?
We say a grain of salt in the US, but it's good to know that.
But a pinch of salt. I think, you should definitely do your research and really kind of know how those coins are going to be used and just understand how they might develop going forward and how it might look if kind of, regulation changes. You never know. It's always good to be cautious.
For sure. And Blake, I am going to ask you, I just sent you a link here. You're in Berlin for how many more days?
Another 5 days. 5 days.
Another 5 days. Okay. I'll pay for it. It will cost 0.6 euros. Can you book a hot desk for 1 day at the Berlin co-working space? At least go in for half an hour and see if it works and report back?
Yeah, we can do that. For sure. Let's do it.
Okay. Listeners, I just signed up Blake to do this against his own will. This is the first time he's heard of it, but we'll have an outro where Blake talks about his experience paying 0.6 euros for 1 day at a Berlin co-working space.
This is going to be interesting. I'm just finding out where it is. Hopefully it's not millions of miles away from where I live.
Potsdamer Platz 11.
Okay, we're good.
Yeah, okay.
We're good. It's not too bad. Okay, nice. Let's see.
Yeah, book it for tomorrow or Friday, man, and see if it works. Just see if you can do it and say, hey, I paid in Ethereum. I'd be curious to see if it works. But yeah, hey, Blake, man, this was an interesting episode. And yeah, I'm excited to find out about your experience, man.
Yeah, I will report back and I'll record the experience and let you know how the whole process goes. I won't tell them who I am, though. I'll just, going undercover.
Do you know who I am? I'm from Blockchain 2025 podcast. All right. See you next week.
See you later, guys.
How do you prefer your crypto news? If it's through your headphones, then you'll love this podcast. This Week in Bitcoin is an easy-to-digest news summary published every Friday with a length of 15 minutes or less. Subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Bitcoin.com podcast network.
So Blake, you paid 0.7 euros for an office in Berlin. How was it, man?
That's right, Matt. It felt a bit bizarre, to be honest, purely because, I went on the metro or the subway and basically rocked up in the business district of Berlin next to all the super nice buildings. And then I go into pretty much the nicest one and go up to, I think, the 13th floor. And yeah, walk in and there's pretty much a co-working space there that is very comparable to a WeWork. And it cost me 70 cents.
That's amazing. And I think it's a little bit of, some arbitrage there. We see 4-seat offices, in these prime cities for less than 2 euros right now. That's amazing. I wonder how the business model will work out. And it's a great way to incentivize users to get people in cheap to a pretty amazing experience. So Blake, thanks for doing that. And we'll see you next week on Blockchain 2025.
See you then, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Bitcoin.com podcast network. To learn more about our shows, visit Bitcoin.com/podcast. Bitcoin.com podcast network.